She gave up everything to marry him. What he did next was beyond her wildest dreams, but not in the way she imagined. Platinum and ambition were the two pillars around which Ava Archer built her life. The view of Manhattan that she had from her corner office at Sterling and Finch was so breathtaking that it was almost as if she owned the skyline. Her clothes exuded an air of assertiveness, and her social schedule was filled with names that were significant. To put it simply, she was a formidable opponent. After then, Silas Thorne arrived. Rather than arriving with a commotion, he did it with a calm focus. It was not the world of spreadsheets and stock options that she was used to. His hands were calloused from the process of creating rainwater collecting systems in isolated settlements, and his gaze had the profound calm of ancient woods. Silas was a consultant for sustainable communities. He talked of star fields that could be seen from the summits of mountains, of land that was abundant with promise, and of a life established on purpose rather than profit. Ava was intrigued by him for some inexplicable reason, despite the fact that he was the opposite of her refined life. After spending decades in a room with a filter, it was like taking a deep intake of fresh air. It was not a reasonable choice. Rather, it was a seismic one. The antiseptic halls resounded with the sound of gasps as she announced her resignation. At Sterling and Finch, the minimalist furnishings that she had picked with such care was sold by her, along with her Tribeca apartment. She parted ways with the connections that she had developed via attending networking events and power lunches. The puzzled cries of her relatives, which included the question, "You're throwing it all away for a farmhand," turned into a discomforting static that she shut out. It was a life that Silas promised to be genuine, a life that meant something. In order to accompany him to the beautiful and rolling hills of the Pacific Northwest, she packed 2 bags, said her goodbyes to the skyline, and then followed him. The farmhouse was not a quaint cottage. Rather, it was a solid, worn edifice that was tucked away in a valley that was completely isolated. The air was filled with the buzzing sound of insects and smelled of pine and wet ground. Ava changed her Louboutins for muddy boots, and she substituted kneading sourdough for giving presentations in the boardroom. It was a harsh, unrefined, and peculiar experience. Silas, however, served as her anchor. The way his hand lingered on her back while she learnt to split wood, the shared stillness beneath a canopy of stars. All of these things gave the impression that it was a different type of success. Together with him, she was constructing something that could be touched and felt. Subtle alterations started to occur after that. Ava was advised by Silas to emotionally disengage and fully absorb herself. Her phone, which was her last vestige of the old world, was placed in a drawer in a manner that was both kind and strong. He whispered distractions, while maintaining a kind but uncompromising look. This life needs your whole presence. Journeys to the closest town, which was 30 miles distant and a twisting road away, grew less regular and eventually unheard of. All errands were overseen by Silas. Instead of Ava's vivid city wardrobe, Silas brought home some basic homespun clothing for her to wear. These garments included durable wools and delicate linens. More practical, he would declare with a smirk, and so much more you know. He began bringing people back to their homes. Were not neighbors, but rather people who came at dark and remained until late into the night. They were silent and focused. A vast barn that had been converted that Silas had been painstakingly repairing since their arrival served as the gathering place for them. Infrequently, Ava was invited. "Just boring logistics, love," Silas would remark to her while kissing her on the forehead. "Projects for the community, you slumber." On the other hand, she was able to recognize the deep drone of voices, which sometimes rose in unison and sang something musical but unintelligible. In the vicinity of the barn, the atmosphere appeared to be filled with a distinct energy that was dense and anticipatory. Silas did not urge her to relax, even though it was a cool fall evening. He turned his gaze onto her, his eyes revealing a new and unnerving depth. The tone of his voice was resonant as he continued, "Ava, it is time. Time for you to have a look. Right now is the time for you to comprehend the real dream." Instead of leading her to their usual porch, he walked her in the direction of the barn. The massive doors opened with a swivel. Ava became still within. Suddenly, the vast area underwent a transformation. Numerous individuals, maybe as many as 100, were seated in concentric rings on rough-hewn benches. They were all clothed in plain, identical tunics made of wool that had not been colored. Beside a central dais that was illuminated by dozens of flickering beeswax candles, their faces were oriented towards the dais. There was a thick quiet that lingered out there. It was not her spouse who stood on the dais. Rather, it was a figure that had been transformed. He wore robes that were a dark forest green color, and his posture exuded an authoritative calmness that was unsettling. As he looked throughout the throng, his gaze eventually landed on Ava, who was standing still at the entranceway. There was a collective intake of breath that reverberated across the gathering. The voice of Silas roared out, filling the room, and it was either magnified by the acoustics of the barn or by something else completely. "My brothers and sisters," he said, "we have been training for many years. The empty skin of the planet beyond has been shed due to our actions. Over the years, we have endeavored to achieve harmony with the environment, simplicity of spirit, and purity of purpose." His eyes were penetrating Ava as he stopped, and tonight, the manifestation of the universe's ultimate sign was revealed. The fullest benefit that it bestows upon us on our way to the new dawn. He extended his hand in the direction of Ava. "Of course, is the catalyst?" At that moment, Ava was surrounded by 1,000 eyes that were filled with amazement and devotion, as well as something that is eerily similar to hunger. The phrase "the catalyst" was heard reverberating across the audience. "The woman arrived voluntarily, sacrificed everything," Silas continued, his voice pounding with the intensity of his passion. "She chose to walk away from the highest point in Babylon. She gave up her riches, her prestige, and the whole image of who she was that she had constructed in that world that was fading. As a result of being led to me by a truth that is more profound than reason, how important is her self-sacrifice? The road is shown by her resignation. She exemplifies the full surrender that can only be attained by all of us." His following parted like a wave as he proceeded towards Ava after stepping down from the dais and walking in her direction. He clasped her icy hands in his, and the sensation of his touch was now like to that of chains. "Ava," he continued, his voice lowering to a low whisper that was intended just for her, but it reverberated in the rapt quiet. "Your journey wasn't just to me. This was the reason behind it. You are the live instance of the ideology that we uphold. Because you have given up all that people hold dear, you are considered sacrosanct. When it comes to our transformation, you are the vessel. What is the next step? It's the ascension for which we have been preparing. It is because of you that it starts. You are the starting point." With the power of a physical blow, Ava was confronted with the truth of the situation. His community could not be considered viable. He was a member of an end-times sect. It wasn't that Silas had fallen in love with her. Rather, he had recognized the ideal marketing tool. A high-profile, educated lady who gladly gave up a golden prison for his wilderness. Her sacrifice was not something romantic. Rather, it was a recruiting billboard that had been methodically organized. He had not constructed a life with her. Rather, he had constructed a stage for her, the ideal symbol to inspire his followers to go on whatever horrific ascension he preached. A golden cage was the exquisite farmhouse that was there. The peaceful valley was really a jail that was ingeniously concealed. A charming builder of illusion, the guy she loved, was a man of great charm. The life she had dreamed of and risked everything for turned out to be the beginning of a nightmare for her. At that moment, the audience started chanting in a deep, resonant tone, "The catalyst, the secret, the dawn of a new era." Ava peered into Silas's eyes, trying to identify the one who had mentioned the stars and the mountains. She discovered nothing save the eerie conviction that the prophet possessed. Her selflessness had not resulted in the acquisition of love. Rather, it had garnered her a leading part in a terrible screenplay that she had never read. Indeed, the ideal that he presented to her was beyond anything she could have ever imagined. She found herself at the middle of the stage, the beloved idol of her own unconsciousness, and it was a nightmare that she was awakened from. It was only just starting to become clear what the actual cost of everything was. A mesmerizing beat that appeared to resonate through the wooden planks and into her bones was accompanied by the chanting that became more and more concentrated around her. The rhythm of Ava's heartbeat pounded in her throat, and her breath came in too quickly. Not in a painful way, but with a possessiveness that made her feel as if she were a relic or a precious thing. Silas tightened his grasp on her hands. "It is the catalyst. The crucial factor. Due dawn is here. She felt as if she was being suffocated by the words. In spite of her want to scream and break free, she was unable to do so because the weight of their combined attention held her in place. All of these individuals, both males and females of varying ages, had a fervent expression on their faces as they perceived her to be heavenly. In addition, all of this had been organized by Silas. As he moved in closer, his lips fell lightly on her ear. God, you feel it, don't you? The warmth of his breath and the tenderness of his words gave the impression that this moment was more personal than horrific. The pull of fate, she said. That is exactly what you were destined to do. Ava gulped deeply, attempting to maintain her voice as she did so. Silas, I don't understand. His grin was just perfect. You will. By doing so, he turned her toward the audience and raised their hands together in a gesture of solidarity. The barn was filled with a collective gasp, which was then followed by a wave of heads that were lowered, as if in display of devotion. Tonight, Silas said, we are about to enter the completion phase. Catalyst has arrived at the scene. There will soon be a reckoning. The audience erupted in impassioned whispers, and several of them showed blatant signs of crying. The skin of Ava was tingling. Taking stock, the last stage? A lady with sharp features and piercing blue eyes, clothed in the same undyed tunic as the others, emerged from the rear of the barn and walked forward. She was wearing the same tunic as the others. As the lighting illuminated the room, she brought a bowl made of wood that contained a black liquid that shimmered. After releasing Ava's hand, Silas proceeded to remove the dish away from the human being. He dipped his fingers into the liquid, which contained what seemed to be blood, and then drew a mark on Ava's forehead. The material was warm and somewhat sticky. He repeated, marked by the earth, 3 times. Chosen by the stars. Ava's tummy began to twist. This wasn't only a cult, however. It was a rite of passage, and she was the focal point of the situation. As she moved closer, the lady who had brought the bowl continued to speak in a tone that was low but audible. All of the preparations have been finished. The land is set to be used. Silas gave a little nod. Then we proceed at dawn. Ava's thoughts were racing. It is dawn. At daybreak, they are making preparations for something. It was necessary for her to go. Right now. If so, how? Farming was a long way from any kind of civilization. Her phone was hidden away in a room. The individuals who were around her were zealots who saw her as a messiah of some kind. Silas, the man in whom she had placed her confidence, loved, and sacrificed all for, was the head of their group. He switched his attention back to her, feeling a change in his look that was almost reminiscent of adoration. Come, my sweetheart. You are in need of rest. Tomorrow will bring about a complete reset. She forced herself to nod to comply with the situation. It was possible that she may find a means to leave before daybreak, if she operated in a cooperative manner. A portion of the throng parted for them as Silas led her out of the barn. Some of them reached out to brush their fingertips over her sleeves, as if she were a saint. It was a breezy night and the stars were brighter than they should have been. Ava, however, hardly noticed it. Mostly due to the fact that she noticed something in the distance, just beyond the forest line, that caused her blood to run cold. This is a newly excavated hole. In addition to that, there were rows of shallow graves.